Hello, dreamers and thinkers, and welcome to episode 3 of Identity in the Diaspora. For today's episode, I am joined by 2 amazing guests. They are 2 out of 8 of my parental units. And a lot of people often ask, what is a parental unit? And well, our parents took the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, to another level, and they have all come together. And so between the 4 couples, I have 8 parents, and 2 of them are joining me today. Yes, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Masimba June, and I'm Kuzai.
Hey guys, my name is Corah, and I get the amazing opportunity to be Kuzai's. I like to call myself future mother-in-law, because if I call myself auntie, she's never going to marry any of my sons. So that's me.
Now is not the time. So to start off with, if you guys want to briefly explain your life up until now, whoever wants to go first, take it away.
I'll go. So I was born in Zimbabwe, born and raised in Zimbabwe, and lived in there until I got married. And then after that, I lived between Zimbabwe and South Africa for about 4 years before we migrated to Australia, and we came straight to Townsville. And that's where we are now. We've got 3 beautiful children, 2 sons and a daughter. One daughter has moved out of home. She's working in Alice Springs right now, and the other son is in college away from Townsville, and the last one lives with us. So yeah, that's me.
Dad?
So born and bred in Zimbabwe, up until the age of 27. That's when I left Zim, heading to the United Kingdom. Stayed in the United Kingdom for 9 years, close to 10. So Kuzai, my eldest daughter, born
That's
in
me.
Zimbabwe. I left Zim when she was 2. She followed a year later. Second daughter is Kylie, and born in the UK, and she's 13 this year. And the young man, we moved here in 2009, born in 2012 here in Australia. So as you can see, it's a United Nations kind of a family. Yeah, Zimbabweans, British, and Australians. And yes, this is where we are.
Okay, so from that, I gather that you both moved out of Zimbabwe, South Africa, when you were in your mid to late 20s?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so at that stage when you left, did you feel like you had a grasp on your identity per se?
I would personally say I think I had a grasp on my identity, but I like to qualify that in that my identity, I view it as something that changes from time to time. I hinge my identity around the society. So
Yeah.
probably look at it like a chameleon. It's the same thing, but it changes colors depending on where it is. The core of the chameleon remains the same, but the colors change from place to place. So yeah, having that in mind, I like to say I had my identity in place. I knew who I was.
Okay, I like that. Dad?
Same for me, I would say I had my strong identity after I've been born and bred in Zimbabwe up to the age of 27. So I had that in me. Moving over to the United Kingdom, I suppose I had to shed some of my identity away in order to accommodate the new culture that I was living in.
Yeah.
And the same thing as well when I moved to Australia. And overall, I think, yeah, I've managed to fuse the 3 different cultures to come up with something else that I don't know what I can call it.
For my identity, can I just add one thing? When I was growing up, I grew up in a huge family, and that meant that I didn't live with my biological family throughout my childhood. I lived with them in bits and pieces. So from when I was born to when I got to grade 5, between that time, I lived with my grandmother for a while, and then I'd stay in the city with my mom and my other sisters, and then every school holiday would go to the village. So that's a different identity that you have to assume. I look at it as when I change my social placing, I change my identity as well. When I was in the city, I would be a schoolgirl, but when I go to the village, that role, I don't assume that role.
You
So
become a village girl.
I become a village girl. I become one of the kids who's there to help the adults. And so after that, after grade 5, probably, I had to live with my auntie for 2 years before I went into boarding school. And on school holidays, I'd go to the village where my parents were now living, or to my other many aunts. So my culture and my identity have always been, I hesitate to say this, but I'll call it fluid.
Yeah, that's the word I was going to use, fluid. So in that sense, was having to move to a different society as much of an adjustment, or because you had to do so much?
It was. It was an adjustment in its sense, because when I was moving before migration, my moving meant that I was moving among a familiar people.
Yeah.
I'd been to those places. I knew who those people were. But when I moved here, it was a different ballgame. I moved from the familiar to the unfamiliar. So it was different. And I had different roles at that time. When I was moving as a child compared to moving as a mom, that came with a different set of challenges.
Very true.
Because when I was little, all I worried about when I moved to my auntie's was, am I going to get a bed to sleep on? Do I get to enjoy that? Or do I sleep on the floor like I do at home? That was all I had to worry about.
Yeah. So on that, how did having to raise children or a child whilst navigating that journey change things, and what difficulties did it bring?
For me, I mean, having brought up in Zimbabwe, and we know how we were all brought up back there, there was an emphasis on Sika, Hunu, or Ubuntu, which, if you try to translate that into English, I mean, that's basically manners. But in that, I think there were 3 key pillars that was ingrained into us from an early age, and we grew up with that. So one of them is, I'll say, number 1 will be respect. Number 2, I'll say obedience. And number 3 was politeness. I think those were the 3 key pillars of manners that as a kid you were expected to have. By respect, it was respect to yourself as a person and respect to others, more so towards elders, regardless of whether that elder is a stranger, is a villager, is a next door neighbor, a brother, a sister, you name it.
Yeah.
Obedience, same thing as well. There was obedience to elders and authority. You wouldn't question authority, be it at home. Your parents are in authority of you.
But why?
At you school, don't ask that question.
No.
At school, the teacher is on authority of you. When you go to work, your boss, and there was no questioning of authority. You just had to do as you are told. And of course, politeness that comes with just being pleasant, warmth towards others.
Yeah.
And I think even up to today, that's why you find with the way the situation in Zimbabwe is, people don't erupt, people don't, it's because of this upbringing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having to move to a different culture where kids from the age of 2 are starting to question why when you're telling them to do something, that to me is the challenge that I had to adjust to. And I think from a personal point of view, what helped me most was I started my nursing career, I think it was a year after getting into the UK. And some of the modules in there, I remember doing a module called Understanding Self and Others that taught me a lot about how I had to change my strong-held views in order to accommodate others.
Yeah.
And there was also another module on culture, and you could see culture conflict, and it rang bells in me that, yeah, I'm in a different culture now. Obviously, I'm going to be raising my kids in this different setting. And I think one thing that resonated with me at that point, I don't know whether there's such a thing, I became a parent before I had Kudai. What I mean by that is I had to raise my
Deputy
younger
parents.
brother and
That's right.
younger sister. So basically having to live with them. At that time, all I knew is what I grew up knowing. And my dad had that iron fist on me growing up. And I kind of like modeled my parenting around that. So raising my young brother and my young sister, I would say I had that iron fist on them. When I started nursing, reflecting back, I realized that maybe some of my heavy-handed approach in raising them up, dealing with discipline issues, might have contributed to, how can I put it across, might have contributed to them having a conflict with me instead of having that respectful relationship.
Yeah.
And what I remember vividly is my father passed away when I was 18. I had passed my O-level with flying colors. And at that time, I'd gone into lower six doing my A-levels. And my father at that stage, he had released that iron fist. I'm sure he had seen that, oh, there's a responsible young man now, I'm releasing him. Unfortunately, that's at the time when he passed away, when I just started to have that friendship kind of relationship with a parent. So reflecting on that, I said, well, I would want to have a friendship approach with my kids right from the beginning, rather than to leave it until later. So I would say that's what helped me as well along the way.
Yeah. I like how you spoke about the asking why. That's a big moment of reflection I've found too.
Yeah.
And it's challenged myself to sort of be self-aware. Most of the things I couldn't explain to my kids why I did them, why I asked them to do what I expected them to do, because nobody ever taught me. You can never teach what you don't know. I knew that there was one way, but because they knew a different way, or they were exposed to a different way, that meant that they could sort of go, hey, what's going on? So yeah, that was a challenge to me, and it just started to peel away some layers of this culture that weren't useful in this environment. So going back to the hardest parts, I like to look at parenting as, if I had to liken it to a job, it would be maybe being what do you call those people, tour guide. So you tour guide people, and English had just gone there. So when you're a tour guide, what you essentially do is you take people around and they navigate the community. And as a parent, you take your children on a life journey and you navigate life with them. So that's one challenge. And then when you parent, when you're a migrant parent, that looks like a double challenge to me. So you've got your initial tour guide job, and now imagine being taken away out of your usual touring place. Say you're a tour guide in Florence, and then one day you end up in Kampala, and you have to tour guide there. you have an idea of what being a tour guide means. It comes with its own challenges. You have a different group every time. The weather's always different. So the kids' seasons are always changing. And then you go into another environment, you're not a tour guide in Kampala, you have not even a single idea about how life is like in Kampala. What's that place? Suddenly you're left with your identity is challenged, is what I felt. So part of my role as a parent is to just shine light and go, here, this way, kids, let's go. But they were learning as I was learning.
Yeah.
So I found it difficult in opening up. So maybe letting down the guards to go, okay, I am a protector, and according to my heritage culture, this is not a norm. But that was not a fair imposition on the, is imposition the right word? That was not a fair translation of the environment, because the kids were in a different environment and I was using maybe centimeters to measure a different thing that didn't work. So what I felt in that time was I was not equipped for the new role of navigator slash parent. And the other thing was my loss of roles, because if you are looking at the person, environment, and occupation model of looking at life, you're a person. Those three things interact for you to be who you are. So you are a person, and your life is influenced by environment and the things you do every day. Where I was in Zimbabwe, I was a parent, almost a co-parent among my family. But coming here, I didn't have the other parts of my parenting peers. I was parenting on my own, and looking at the situation was challenging. Realizing that my children's life trajectory solely depended on David and I was a little bit of a whopper. I had never seen anybody parent without other people, so it was scary. Go, how do I even do that? You can't name something you don't know. If you don't know it, you don't know.
Yeah.
So learning from the environment and trying to pick what might work for us, what might not work, and making mistakes on that way as well, to go, okay, we thought that would work, but oops, that didn't work. Luckily, we've got 3 children, so we got to do a little bit of experiment. We experimented on the first ones. The things that worked, we took them to the second child. The things that worked, tough luck for her, we just shaped them. So yeah, my sense of being and belonging changed when I moved here. There was lots of psychological distress and emotional distress as well, just turmoil, trying to find out, who am I? Imagine walking into a shop, all you're trying to do is buy groceries. You go there and you go, you don't have a favorite anymore. You used to go to the shops and you used to meet my so-and-so, greet you, hello, how are you? There was a continuation in my life. So people could greet me, talk to me about things that I knew. But if I went to the shops, no favorites, no familiar people, I don't even know what I like anymore. So that was hard.
On that.
Yeah, maybe just to add on as well on what you've said about co-parenting. I remember well how either grandparents would come to our house or would visit them, and how grandparents would spoil you. I mean, those things that parents will be hard on you. No, don't do this. No. But grandparents would be like, turn a blind eye and maybe sit you on their lap and say, hey, this is how you do this, don't do this, in a nicer way, as opposed to how your parent would speak to you about that same situation. So
That's
to me, that was more like a rescue, but also a point of what can I say? A point of release, both for the parents and for the kid, where you are allowed to do things that you can't always do, but the way you are told with grandparents or with an auntie or an uncle was very different from how your parent would have dealt with it. All that was washed away when we moved into the diaspora. So you became the grandparent, you became the uncle, you became that auntie. So you had to try and merge everything to be that uncle that would turn a blind eye when their nephew or niece is doing something, but tell them on a corner, hey, you don't have to do this again. Or that grandparent that would take their grandson, sit them on their lap, and they tell you, oh, remember what you were doing that time, don't do this. Whereas if it was your parent, the same message would come out on you harder and harsher. And that creates conflict. Yeah.
I was actually going to ask you, was living in England easier than living here because we had more family in England?
Definitely it was. Because there was always, England was more like a mirror image of Zimbabwe.
I actually said something similar, yeah.
Because we always had a cousin, had an uncle, and we had lots of grandparents, not necessarily your grandparents, but grandparents from other uncles. And so there was always someone there to assist with parenting. So definitely it was different, yeah.
Yeah.
And it felt to me like I was recreating the role of parent of my motherhood into something that I didn't know. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what it should look like because I didn't have a comparative. My model of parenting was what I learned in my cultural heritage and what I experienced and what I've observed. But coming here, I didn't have those other pillars to parent with me. So it was a unique experience on its own, just learning to trust or mistrust my instincts and learning to look around and dig deep and go, okay, it is what it is. Now that we are where we are, we have made this decision and we're going to go with it. We are in the right place. Yes, the pieces are moving, but how else can we navigate this situation? How else can we make up for the pieces that have moved away?
Yeah.
So
So in hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Oh, definitely. There is so many things I would have done differently. Like Masimba said, that the parenting role back home is sort of an authority. There's a hierarchy between a parent and a child. And that is through and through. Parents don't per se play with their children. I don't remember ever saying to my dad, let's go and play outside. Oh, you're the goalie and I'm shooting. But coming here, my kids were exposed to an environment where their friends were playing with their parents. So just embracing that possibility that, you know what, I could do this. It felt like this is wrong. Like, what kind of parent does that? So I was constantly challenged, and it took a lot of self-awareness and mistakes as well. The other thing I'll talk about is functional parenting is what I mostly focused on. So by functional parenting, I mean, okay, have you done your chores? Have you done your schoolwork? Have you done this? Go and play outside. I've provided for you. That's it. The relationship is almost superficial when you parent with a model that I was parented with and the parenting that I parented with initially. There's no emotional connection. There's no, hey, let's talk about this. That connection is a connection that I could naturally have with another's child, but not my own. Why? Because I didn't know that it was possible. I'd never experienced it. I'd never noticed it. The only way I related to the older people was, like Masimba said, the aunties go, hey, auntie, this is what I'd like to do. And the aunties would give us sort of like an area of risk, take safe risk, harm minimization.
That's it.
But I didn't have that. So if I couldn't trust that where you were going was right, then you couldn't go. So as a result, the kids missed out on a lot of opportunities that most other kids experienced because mom and dad couldn't trust where they were going. So if they were going for a party, we didn't know what to expect at a party. I remember going to a party one day and it was bring a plate. Okay, bring a plate. So you invite me to your party and I bring my own food. What's that? And so
That is
to
so
me,
un-African.
that was different. That's right. I grew up in a culture of food is shared. What's yours is mine. What's ours is all ours.
Yeah.
So I always feared the best, and I would say my guards were always up, ready to protect. So you can imagine going through life with that pent up energy of, okay, you're just watching what's the next bad thing to happen. So you miss out on smelling the roses. So that's one thing I would say. That's something I could do differently if I could rewind, but I can't. So possibly when the grandkids come, I'll do it differently.
Oh God, make it
You are
stop.
spot on there, and I think I had similar experience in the UK, but then you were almost forced into it, whether you liked it or not. Because in the UK, even at play areas, kids had to be supervised by parents or an adult. So, yeah, to me, and like you said, that authority back home, I think parents feared that if they play with you, that they lose that respect and they won't be able to instill that authority
Yeah,
or
That's
to
right.
gain it back. So no, we don't play with you. We tell you what to do, what not to do, and you just have to. So going to the UK, where even when your child want to play, it's freezing cold and play areas known to be unsafe sometimes. I was just pushing myself grudgingly. Yes, I'm going to do this. And you know, kids at that age, they really want to play outside, regardless of the weather, circumstances.
that never stopped me.
Let's go and play.
Yeah, it's with the gloves, the scarf, the hat on. Let's go.
Yeah. So it was almost like forced on me. So to say if there was anything to change, maybe I would have done it with a full heart instead of going into it. I have to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And like you say, the intention is clear, but the process could have
Yeah.
been changed.
And I think I bonded more with my kids being in the diaspora than I would have done if I was in
That,
Zimbabwe.
that's right.
Because even
I
sometimes
remember.
when I go back to Zimbabwe, I've had people asking me of even my interaction with Kudzai, sometimes people questioning, hugging and piggybacking, like you can't do that with a grown-up daughter. But that's what this bonding brought to us anyway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember a little wasn't an incident, it was an experience that Yemu and I went through. So what was happening, Yemu almost never was on time. And we had one car. I was a full-time student raising 3 children. David was working out of town. It's peak exam. And she wanted a lift to go to work. As simple as that. But how I took it was an opportunity for a lesson to let's train for public skills, for public transport skills. Okay, you hop on a bus, this is where you get the buses, and this is where you go. So I could have simply gotten on the bus with her earlier on or later on. Okay, this is where you get on the bus, this is where you go. But from the parenting model in my head, this is how the process was to be done and actually was done. It was as simple as, Yemu, I'm going to work now. You find your way to your work. I'm going to school. You find your way to work. And I literally drove past her because in my head, she needed to learn a lesson of, you're not entitled. This is my car. Could that lesson have been had in a different circumstances? Of course, it could have, but I didn't know any better. And poor child, she had to catch the bus. And yeah, so you can imagine what she was thinking on that trip. How does my mother do this to me? And to me, wasn't even bothered. But carrying on, years later, she learned that, okay, now I can go to work on my own. I don't need anybody. My friends can't catch the bus, but I can catch the bus. But at that stage, I was the bad guy, and she was kids. Kids need to learn this. I must teach them the lesson. It was almost like preparing them for an event that if I was in the situation, say I died, worst case scenario, then what would I do? That was my fear. Okay, how are my kids going to survive if I die? But I
Building
didn't
resilience,
enjoy the moment in a foreign country, but I forgot to enjoy the moments of right now we're living, we're together. Why should we replicate a situation that hasn't even occurred? So
That's what I
I
was
would
going to
soften.
say. That's such a big one, is that I feel like in the context of our culture, it's a lot of preparing your children to live without you, but almost to the
That's
point where
right.
it's like now you're not enjoying the time that you have together. Like they're going to
That's
be
it.
so prepared to live without you. They will live without you even though you're still here.
That's right. And then the sort of children learn to live without you, even when you're there. So there is no connection. Because
Yeah.
if we're on the bus, imagine the conversations we could have enjoyed on the bus together. And the conversations, that memory we would have had, but I missed it because I didn't see it as an opportunity for me to learn. Everything was, I viewed parenting as I know everything. I had the monopoly of wisdom and knowledge. They didn't know a single thing. There was no, there was, all I had to do was parent. But now I look at it as a dual relationship. There's
Yeah.
parenting and there's something I like to call childing. My children child me, if there's any such word. They train me to navigate the world. And yeah, we both bring unique circumstances to the parent-child relationship.
Yeah.
And
True.
yeah.
And that concludes this episode. The original conversation was about an hour long, but I decided to split it into 2 parts. So the second part of this conversation will be coming out on Thursday at 5 p.m. But I hope you guys are getting so much from this. I really enjoyed this conversation and just hearing their insight. And yeah, I can't wait for you guys to hear the rest of it. We will see you on Thursday. Bye.